right. It is 5:30. Let's call the meeting to order. We all set? Brenda, we're live streaming. Okay, thank you. Let's see. First up on the agenda is the Jonathan Carver Parkway Corridor Study Update, which is not so easy for me to say.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So tonight we have Jack Corkle with WSB and Dan McCormick with Carver County to present an update on the Jonathan Carver Parkway Corridor Study. Before they get into it, I just wanted to kind of give an overview of kind of where we're at and where we're heading. So this corridor study is essentially the first step in preparing for an eventual project along the corridor. We've talked in previous sessions about the next step being a project from 6th Street North to 212. However, the year of when that's going to occur is undefined at this point. And so don't think of this corridor study and how it relates to when it's completed and when it's adopted and the comments, because we have an open house coming up. The council is going to be looking at it. The county board is going to be looking at it. Even though we want to finish up, we're not holding any specific kind of infrastructure project back at this point. This study will inform the design process, so there's multiple steps left to go. But I just wanted to kind of set a context for where we're at in the process. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Jack and Dan.
So just as a reminder for everybody, the northern part of our study limits is Levi Griffin Road, and then we go down to the intersection with County Road 40 where it turns to go down towards the Jordan area. So it's a longer corridor, and there's a lot of different development patterns on there that are influencing the things that we've studied in the process. So as a reminder for folks, our overall objective of the corridor study itself was to develop a plan that really looked at the short and the long-term needs along the corridor. And the idea was to look at things in a multimodal perspective. So we weren't just looking at things for the single vehicle car user, right? There's trucks on this corridor. We have a very active gravel mining that's probably not going to go away in the next 20 years. We have a new elementary school, so we have school buses, and we have a lot of students that are walking, or there's encouragement for students walking into biking to school. So we have a lot of different users on the corridor, and the idea was to make sure that the study took all of those users into account and into perspective. So we had developed some initial goals for the study, really to make sure that we are providing that efficient and reliable travel, that we are safely accommodating all the different users, building upon the existing non-motorized transportation network, and we'll get into that when we talk about the concepts, but there are some good elements in terms of pedestrian and bicycle facilities out there today, but there are some gaps, and some of those gaps are by that school area, and so we want to build on that and make that stronger. We also want to provide infrastructure improvements that are compatible with the elements around the corridor, to making sure that we are sensitive to the different contexts along the corridor, and then do the improvements that we identify in a financially responsible manner. So you're not redoing things. Let's look at the bigger picture, and if it makes sense to preserve some right-of-way today for something we need 20 years out, that's probably a better investment than having to wait 20 years and we're impacting a building or somebody's home. So that's kind of the framework in terms of the goals that we had devised. So we did a number of technical evaluations. We looked at the amount and the timing of development. We looked at traffic projections in terms of how many users are likely to be on the corridor. We looked at congestion on Jonathan Carver Parkway and at key intersections along the corridor. Same thing for safety. There are a couple of areas where we have some crash problems today. We want to make sure that we address those and make sure we're not causing problems for the future. Again, that pedestrian and bicycle connectivity is that I had talked about before. Looking at access on the corridor as development occurs and keeping that consistent or making that work as best we can with some of the guidelines that are out there from the county, and in terms of even with MnDOT in terms of our connection to their system. Looking at different types of intersection control. So we looked at, do we keep things as as side street stop, as some of them are today, where, the only people that have to stop are the intersecting roadways. Does it make sense to consider roundabouts or traffic signals? And so we looked at a bunch of different options at those key intersections along the corridor. We also identified environmental resources along the corridor in terms of wetlands and some of the, if there's threatened and endangered species in the area. And then we were looking at hydrology as well in terms of how we do drainage along the corridor. This happens on a lot of roadways. A lot of the roadways were put in before we had current drainage rules. So you get, ponding issues, or sometimes there's flooding issues on different corridors. And so it's trying to make sure that when the county or the city makes improvements, that we're addressing all of those water resource needs as well. So then those were kind of the base technical analyses to figure out what are the existing and current problems that we anticipate on the corridor. And then we went through and we developed a number of alternatives and evaluated those alternatives. So we looked at how many travel lanes do we think are needed on the corridor, and where are those needed? Is it for the whole corridor, or is it just a portion of the corridor? We looked at constructing dedicated turn lanes. There's some intersections where you don't have a left or a right turn lane approaching an intersection, and that can lead to some safety problems, and it can also it can also make drivers uncomfortable when you see that car in your rearview mirror coming at you, and you want to turn left and you have nowhere else to go. So those are the types of things that we looked at in terms of the intersections. We looked at some of the different types of access locations. Do we keep them full? Do they become right in, right out, or three-quarter, again, for some of that safety and mobility? Again, I had mentioned we talked about roundabouts, side street stops, and traffic signals, eliminating gaps in that network. We looked at some potential landscape treatment and applications, and we'll have information on that to present at the open house. Some stormwater treatment and where we might need to look at some potential ponding. We've talked about some maintenance activities along the corridor. As we get to the southern end, when you make that turn to go towards Jordan, there's some trees in that area that make seeing that intersection a little bit difficult. So potentially going out and doing some tree clearing and some other types of activities. And then we looked at some of the right-of-way impacts for some of the alternatives. In terms of right-of-way, it was, again, preserving that long-term corridor, as well as when we were looking at some of those intersections. You can probably build a roundabout for any intersection, but your roundabout can get pretty big. You could get 2 or 3 lanes, and that's probably not good for most drivers, and it's going to have a pretty big impact on property. So that's when you start looking at traffic signals again. So those are some of the things that we went through the process. We had gone out previously, and we've asked some folks through some of our different engagement processes to help us identify what the problems were or things that they'd like to see on the corridor in terms of improving it. So we've had some open house meetings. We had focus group meetings. We've had meetings with different resource agencies, so meeting with like the county's watershed folks and understanding any concerns from those types of agencies. We've done a couple little newsletters. We've got a project website. We've sat in on development review meetings. Since we've started this study, there's been a number of developments that have come forward along the corridor. And so we've sat in with the development folks talking about where we think the corridor is going to end up, so that we're preserving the right-of-way before development happens, so that we're not going back to people after the fact about where that's going to occur. And then we've given some updates to City Council, the County Board, as well as the Township Board. So we do have some upcoming stakeholder involvement. So I'm here tonight along with Dan, just giving you guys an update of where we're at. Dan's been working with the County Board in terms of making sure they're up to date on items. We're doing some website updates. There will be a mailing coming out with the utility bill for the upcoming meeting in April. We are going to have a public open house on April 11th from 6:30 to 8:30 at the Carver Elementary School. So at that meeting, we're going to be presenting some results of the technical analysis that we've done, as well as some of the alternatives that we've done. And then we'll present some of the cost estimates and sort of the phasing or the timing of the different recommendations. So specific things that we'll have our study area map showing, again, reminding people where we're talking about. We'll remind folks of the goals and objectives. We'll have the issues maps that they helped us identify at those different engagement processes that I had been talking about. We've got some updated information regarding some of the proposed growth and land use changes and some of the timing of that. We'll also have some of the information with regard to the environmental resources along the corridor and reminding folks of some of our crash problems that we had along the corridor segments themselves, as well as at those key intersections, as well as on the segments. We'll have some updated information with regarding existing and future traffic volumes. For those of you that have listened to my updates, you knew we were kind of on hold for a while we were waiting for better information in terms of traffic, and we have that now. And then those areas where we're going to see that congestion continuing in the future. We will have an ultimate corridor concept, which will show roadways, intersections, and trail improvements. We will have what's called a typical section, so people, if they were looking at the side of the road, they can see how many travel lanes there are. They could see where there would be trail locations, so that they get a sense of how that corridor could be looking and functioning. We'll have a general landscaping concept, which does build on the concepts that you guys have done on Levi Griffin, so tying in some of the river rock ideas and some low vegetation along the corridor as well. And then, as I indicated, some of the costs and the implementation phasing, and then the next steps of the process. So I'm going to walk through kind of where we are at the northern end of the corridor, and I think you have the concepts in front of you. Just trying to think the best way to go through this. I'm going to start at the northern end, so we're near the intersection, the interchange with Highway 212. So on the screen, it's the piece, to me, that looks like a diamond piece that doesn't have a lot of coloring on it. One of the things that we think that we're going to need to do is restripe the bridge as we go further to the north and towards that intersection with Levi Griffin Road to allow for a full 4-lane roadway on that side as you're approaching the intersection.
On the east side or the west side?
It's on the east side, so as you're going northbound. And so right now there's 2 left turn lanes that go into Levi Griffin Road. And we, in terms of when we were doing this first project that's kind of highlighted in yellow, we would recommend restriping that to a single left turn lane and allowing through travel lanes to get through the intersection. We think the traffic volumes are such that we're going to need an additional travel lane to get us through the intersection. So it doesn't change any building out there, it just changes the striping that's out there. As we go further to the south, so once you're on the south side of Highway 212, as we making our way down, we'd recommend a 4-line divided roadway for the corridor itself all the way down to 4th Street. So you'd have 2 lanes of travel in each direction. However, we would be preserving enough right-of-way to have eventually 6 lanes in that area through Ironwood. So preserving enough space so that if traffic volumes grow at a higher rate, where we're really seeing congestion problems in the future is that northern piece between Ironwood and the interchange with Highway 212. We would have a pedestrian and bicycle facility for sure along the west side of the corridor, so that's in the southbound direction. We'd also have trail facilities south of Springwood, on the east side as well. Part of the reason for only having a trail at this point on one side is that there's a limited amount of space. And if we need to put in 6 lanes in the future, having a trail there on that side gets a little bit complicated in terms of our space, because there's quite a bit of topography from the roadway down into the neighborhood. So in order to fit everything in, we have to get a little bit careful with our space.
One really quick question. When you say facilities, does that mean the trail, or are you referring to something else when you say facilities?
Trail facility is what I was talking about there, but the roadway itself would be 4-lane. And I apologize, that's a 4-lane facility. So I've probably used the word a couple of times tonight. So roadway, 4 lanes, trail on each side of the corridor south of Springwood, Spring Creek, sorry, versus, got Ironwood and Spring Creek mixed up. South of Spring Creek, we'd have a trail on both sides of the corridor in this area. We would just have it on the west side, north of Spring Creek.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, sorry about that.
Excuse me, Jack, can you mention the underpass as well?
Yep, I'll get to that. I'm just making my way down. So then we've got the Spring Creek and Monroe Drive intersection, or Monroe Drive intersection. There's a number of improvements that'll be happening there that will help support the Meridian Fields development and the United Properties development that are going to be coming forward. So that intersection is going to get a bit bigger, and at this point, based on some of the right-of-way impacts and the traffic operations, we're recommending a traffic signal go in at that location as well. As you move further to the south, we would connect the Spring Creek neighborhood via a trail, as we have coming out at the southern end of the intersection, and we would include a new pedestrian underpass that would help serve the school. So this will tie into the school site, and we'll work with the school to make sure that we have all the right connections. But the idea is that the students could then cross underneath and not have to go to the intersection at Ironwood. So doing that is an advantage for a couple of things. It helps the traffic flow through that intersection a little bit better because we're not having students cross there. And 2, it's safer for the students to cross there. And we would have to work with the school in terms of crossing guards, just like they have crossing guards at the signalized intersection. We'd, have to have them work with the students at the underpass. But the idea then is that you have an underpass north of the school and an underpass south of the school, so that students should be able to get there fairly easily without a lot of backtracking, because people won't use them if they have to backtrack. So that's the idea, is to feed the neighborhoods into that area. At Ironwood, we would again do some more intersection improvements to make sure that we get all of that traffic flow through that area.
Just a note on Ironwood, we are planning some more extensive, maybe go back.
Yep.
Right now there's a sort of a single left out of there, and it's causing some backups, but we are recommending, it wouldn't impact really any right of way, but widening that roadway further back for a double left out of there. So that's another one of the team's recommendations that we're presenting to the community. So that's just one thing I think I want to note there too.
Yeah, and that should help with the bus flow in and out of that intersection as well. Yep.
And Jack, I'm sorry, you mentioned the trail on just one side. Is that on the west side?
So the trail is on
Both sides by the
both
south of
sides for
school.
most of the corridor.
Okay.
Where we switch to the one side is north of Spring Creek Drive. Again, recognizing that there's some long-term issues if we go to 6 lanes on the actual roadway itself. So the trail would be on the west side just for that area.
We potentially could build it on the east side. There's a comment. This is as you go north and cross 212, having the DOT center there. We want to connect there. So there's space that we can do it. We have it in our plans. It's a matter of people maybe just drop it off from now. Part of it is also just to actually get comment from people. Do you really want a trail on both sides of That's another thing that Brent may have alluded to. We could discuss that further as we go further in design on this in the next year or two.
Yep.
whenever that happens.
But realistically, a trail on the east side from Spring Creek going north, that would be the trail up to 212.
Yes.
That's it.
Yep.
That's kind of what our initial thinking right now is. I mean, obviously, as it goes north past 61 Chaska Boulevard and Griffin, it may go out that way. It's an open question really right now.
One of the constraints was there's only pedestrian access on the west side of the bridge. That's where the sidewalk and the pedestrian curb cuts are, or ped access ramps are. So this plan reflects that kind of real-time existence of, that's the only way we could access right now.
On the bridge going across, is there room to put the same walkway that's on the west side of the 212 overpass?
Why don't I comment on the bridge? So this, what you see right now is the recommended improvement for the near-term reconstruction. We did analyze the bridge in a couple different ways where we could widen it from one side or the other to allow for, more roadway capacity through the interchange as well as trail space. Right now, there's really only space right now physically on the bridge for a trail on one side, and that currently is on the west side.
Okay, so there isn't space.
There is
Section
not
down right
space
now. Okay.
to do that.
Okay.
So some communities have done an outboard trail on one side, and that's for example, what Chaska is doing with the 44 interchange project. We're planning to do a bridge outside of for the trail on one side in that case. So it's commonly done around the area. Scott County's doing it as well.
Shut through Shakopee on 169, there's a couple of bridges that they added the pedestrian on after the fact. So it has like this little jut out from the side that they've tied into. And that gets pretty expensive. What we are also recommending is that in about 10 years, re-looking at the interchange area itself based on how fast growth is occurring and the intensity of which it's occurring. If a new interchange type is needed, then there would definitely be pedestrian facilities considered as part of that as well, if a new interchange is needed. If not, if in 10 years the idea is that, nope, we don't think we're going to need a new interchange in the next 40 or 50 years, then the idea of doing that potential add-on, if you want trails on both sides of the corridor, may make sense at that time to pursue.
Thank you.
Going back the wrong way. I have these in the wrong order. As we move further to the south, as we get towards White Pine Way, we are recommending a right-in, right-out at that intersection there. It currently does have full access, but again, we're recommending that 4-lane divided roadway. So traffic would be able to take, if you're going southbound, they'd be able to take a right into the development and or have a right out of it. Their other option would be go down to Dahlgren in order to make that left-hand turn out of the development, or else go towards the north to the Ironwood connection.
So the people in off White Pine Way, they'll only be able to take a right out
Yep.
and a right in
Yes.
coming from the south.
Yep.
The folks on Western
I
White
get it.
Pine
On
Way.
both, yeah, on both
get it.
sides of the corridor in that area. And they do have other connections to other intersections on the corridor. So they both can access other pots, yeah, if they want to make a left-hand turn. As we move further to the south, and again, the trail's on both sides of the corridor here. As we move further to the south and we get to Dahlgren, we are recommending a roundabout at this location. We think it will help with some of the speeds on the corridor, and it's sort of our transition from the busier end of the corridor to the quieter end of the corridor. And we think it will be especially helpful in terms of some of the truck movements coming in and out of the area, and for them to be able to get on and off the corridor. As you move, bless you. As you move further to the south, we would have full access, obviously, to the fire department and the public works facility. And we transition back down to a 2-lane roadway once we get past that area down to 4th. It keeps it pretty consistent with the type of corridor that's there in place today. Recommendations for further to the south at this point, we don't have a lot of changes in terms of the roadway itself, like the roadway geometrics. So right now there's 2 lanes in the northbound direction coming out of the aggregate plant. What we would be looking at in the near term in the corridor is some improvements at that intersection with County Road 40, potentially putting in some left and right turn lanes in that location and doing some of the tree clearing. Ultimately, long-term, we would be looking at a roundabout at that intersection as well, at County Road 40 and 11. Now, yeah.
Oh, can I have a question? So the trails on here, they're different colors. Is there a reason that they're different colors?
Yes, so the ones that are kind of the orange color are the existing ones that are in place, and the brown ones would be the new ones.
Well, some of them are, I guess I'm confused, because some of them look, I guess on the sheet that I'm looking at, maybe I should look up here.
Yeah.
So I guess it's the peach brown colored ones?
Yep,
And
there's
then-
kind of like a peachy orange, and then there's like a darker brown. And the darker brown would be the new segments, or ones that have to be reconstructed.
Okay, because like south of 4th Street, there's a trail there already?
Portions of it, not south, I don't think south, I think to the, sorry, okay, sorry, I can't see from here.
So south of 4th Street, since we widened that intersection a little bit, it might have to be reconstructed. So
Okay,
south of it.
yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
so that's where maybe there's a distinction there. Just a couple, if I don't mind, just a couple things to point out on here is, just as we're looking at the design, we tried to skirt the ball field. It was getting a little bit tight in terms of the mule. As you just go south of the fire department or the public works site, it gets tight in terms of that land right there. And then we tried to just thread the needle between there and the ball field. That's where the scoreboard is and things like that. We're not, right now, I don't know if there's an issue with home run balls leaving the field and hitting the street or not, but this is something that we've noted. We haven't worked out all the stormwater design needs in this area. That's something we're working with your staff as well as our corridor team, but more detail needs to be done with that through the design phases. And it's potentially that this portion of the project would have to run a stormwater system all the way down to the pond closer towards Main Street. There's a small pond down there, but we may have to do some facilities along here all the way down to there just for this portion of the project, for example.
So are you able to push it closer to the fire station if need be? Is there a reason that we've had it so close to the ball field and the park and the trail?
Sure. I mean, that's what we'd get in design. Right now, we're kind of just, finagling it through there just to
Okay.
kind of give a concept for that.
But there is room if you had to push towards the fire
There's a
station?
little bit more room there, but as we get more into detail, we can figure that out better and
Okay.
work with you on that.
Yeah, there's just a couple of things between the cemetery and a couple of the other things that you're pushing for and against in that area in terms of how you introduce curves and things like that. So there's a little bit of wiggle room. But if we push it too far to the west, we're potentially, impacting the daycare and the dentist sites as well.
And then another thing, at 4th Street, there's 2 properties there on the south side of the intersection. Their right-of-way, it just juts out. 2 of the parcels right there aren't the same as the other ones. So there's potentially we're not affecting really too much of their home proper. We haven't gotten the details of like their backyard and things like that, but their backyard setback. But we just want to note that those properties didn't dedicate as much as those parcels further south of there.
That's on the east side?
It's on the south side of the intersection, on the east side of the roadway, yes, sir.
Okay.
The other thing just to note is the extents of the local road improvements. You see Doggan Road and 6th Street. Those are negotiable, working out with Brent and the city team. How far do we want to take this road improvement along Jonathan Carver? How far back on the local streets do we want to take these improvements? And that's just something normally we would do as part of a project, just sometimes those are more local costs and things like that, but something we have shown the extent of that all the way to that new access that's serving the Olson property there, the Oak Tree plat. You can see how that far back that goes. Jack, if you wouldn't mind just switching to the next slide, the first slide. I just want to also note one more thing there.
So if the median is, if we're going to the quieter end of the corridor,
Sure.
and so we still, south of the roundabout then, have a pretty wide median there, is it something that we could remove that in order to have more space?
So by the roundabout, you would not itself, because you want to channel the traffic feeding into the roundabout appropriately.
But
It just seems like a long way to say
Sure.
that we have to funnel it that far, because I've certainly done other ones that don't seem that long.
South of the fire station, we could. I think that the recommendation from the design team, the specific design engineers, was to maybe finish this off. That's what they're saying. This is more like the longer term kind of, get it completed out with the curb and gutter to the full extent that it ever would be widened and be done with it. That's what the approach in this case was, but certainly it could be transitioned sooner. We're also just providing a better left turn lane in and out at 4th Street, so there's more space for people to turn out of there or turn into. But again, that's something that can be discussed further.
Yeah, and I'm not saying maybe even removing the whole thing, because it looks like we've got pieces where it gets smaller in there and wider. So if we're running out of space, and I'm speaking really right now just between the ball field and the fire station, that if there's ways that we can minimize that as well.
Sure, makes sense. One other thing we want to note, Jack alluded to at the development review meetings, we were successful, even though the study's taken longer, to work with the Oak Tree and plat to reserve the right-of-way as part of your review with the Plan Commission and the Common Council. So that right-of-way should be free and clear. We did superimpose this design on that plat and did, as the county, get the right-of-way from that plat at that time. So we don't expect too many details, too much major impact in terms of right-of-way for that plat. There are smaller notions of potential temporary easements near the dental clinic, and then on the other kitty corner to that, on the 6th Street side of the equation, where it gets us a little bit tight, where we may have to feather in and do some grading on both of those properties that I mentioned there. So that's something we're having to, as we get into more detail, we can work that out with the actual detailed survey plans and design plans and go through some options there. Maybe Jack, just go to the next one. The other one I just want to point out, just to highlight a few things. We're also working with the United Properties, the Meridian Fields, to acquire that right-of-way as part of their plat. That's been recommended to your city staff team and others. We're working cooperatively with them for the right-of-way that's shown on here. It's something still that has to be agreed to by them and worked out in the details with them. We're hoping that can be certainly translated, and we're holding fast as a county to require that. It is a little bit extra right-of-way on their part, but they're also adding additional traffic, much more than many other parcels in this area. So it's not, this design does show that expected right-of-way dedication from them. Secondly, we're also working with them on a stormwater pond that's related to the roadway. You can see the large, say, aqua blue there. That's something we're also working with them as well. We've been very fortunate, and they've been very positive in working with us as a county. We've been meeting with them as well on planning that out, so that for the stormwater needs for the corridor, we can reserve that land on theirs and then integrate it with their development plans. Again, that has to come out in the details, but I just wanted to mention that to you, that they have been very positive to work with, United Properties as well as Meridian Fields, and that's something we have allocated county and WSB resources to. We have paid additional money to do that analysis with them, and that's just something, as we go through the process of review, as you're going through their plat, we're looking forward to working together similar to how we did that on the Oak Tree plat. So those are just some highlights there.
I have a couple questions. Does the design include any bearing of existing power lines? And if not, can that be looked at? Could it be negotiable?
It can be. One of the things we are doing right now, and was happening this last fall and is going to occur this spring, is working with Minnesota Valley Electric. They are, as part of the Oak Tree plat, we did lower the grade of the roadway and are relocating the utilities along there. That's something really that has to be probably discussed directly with them in terms of the bearing of that. I know they have been talked about that, so I just don't know their specific plans in this case. For the most part, they are burying most of them, and there's just some of the
I'm
details.
sorry, I mean existing, not anything new. Any of the existing power lines, would those be? And there is quite a significant one from Excel. I'm not sure if I should call it a transmitter. But then too, when you alluded to the baseball diamond,
Yep.
and there's that backstop and right there.
Yeah, Councilmember Sayers talking about the transmission line.
All the transmission lines, okay. That one we'd have to have a special utility meeting with them, which we certainly can with them to kind of figure that out and look at the different cost options. They would look at that and see what they could do in those cases, but we can actually try to reach out to them as part of the corridor meeting potentially. Normally it's done in the design phase, but it's something we try to get ahead of as much as possible. And they have been positive to work with on these other relocations and things like that, but that's something I can.
Yeah, it would be
definitely-
nice to see if it is an option
Sure.
while we're in the design
Okay.
phase.
And I think what I'll do is probably recommend a meeting with your city staff and city engineer and get something in advance, maybe in the next few months. So when they're doing their summer construction season, we can work with them and they can plan ahead if they are doing some other system upgrades. So that's a good comment. Thank you.
Yeah, and then another thing was a question about, does this design include any significant grading? I'm thinking about north of what's the proposed roundabout. At one time, there was talk about grading that hill just for several
Sure.
reasons.
Probably not the hill itself, just along the roadway. You can see sort of some of that's being done now just on the outsides of the roadway. There'd be some grading there done, but not the road itself right now. There's some small, what we call longitudinal profile changes, but not anything of significance that I'm aware of that has been planned. It's just more of running that out as you get down towards 6th Street and Dahlgren more so. So it's a pretty large expense that I don't know that I know of information of people ever really considering major changes to the
Okay.
hill. So.
You good, Lori?
Actually, I just thought of something too when you mentioned expense. This was early in our work session conversation.
Sure.
When you, Jackie, mentioned with pedestrian bridges that it's quite an expense. Is it the land acquisition? Is it doing it after the fact, or just the cost of construction?
They're just expensive to put in because you're having to tunnel underneath, right? You're having to deal with the road. You're having to get at the right elevation in order to keep your road above, and so you have to punch through. So it's just a little bit more of an expensive process than having everything all at the same elevation, right? So it's cheaper to go under than it is to go over, and generally speaking, we don't have huge water table issues here. There's some locations where you have to have pumps and stuff in order to keep your tunnels dry all the time, which that would be a bad situation. And people are more likely to use them than they are the ones that go above. Again, generally speaking, unless you have the topography working in your favor with hills on both sides right across. So it is just more expensive than having that at-grade intersection. But I do think in terms of where the school is situated and the athletic fields and that draw from both sides of the corridor, I do think that will help for pedestrian safety and bicycle safety, especially with an elementary school.
Yeah, for myself, I'm excited to see that in the design concept.
Yep.
I think that'd be really positive.
Yep. Okay.
Jack, you had mentioned the project website. Do you know that off the top of your head?
I apologize if it's JCP. If
www.
it's Jonathan Carver Parkway.
It's right here.
It's on thank you, it's on our handout, yeah. jcpcorridorstudy.com.
And it's safe to assume that if folks can't attend the open house, they can communicate and send thoughts and ideas
Yes.
through that website.
Yep, and we'll
Okay.
post the open house boards after the meeting. We just don't like to do it before because then people make a lot of assumptions and, start talking about, I don't care if people talk, but I want to make sure they have the right information, or people that have gone to the meeting, if they have their thoughts too, are getting it out,
So that website will be updated
Yep,
after
yes,
the meeting.
yep,
Okay.
yep.
The only other thing that I noticed, and I know that this new plan has 2 northbound lanes north of 6th Street.
Yep.
But there's always been that acceleration lane.
Yep.
Going up there for the
Yep.
trucks and for the folks coming
Yep.
out of Sixth Street. That's been very well used.
Yes.
Was there any thought of continuing that to make it 3 lanes effectively up the hill?
So the idea is that we'd have essentially 2 northbound lanes from where they enter from the gravel mining area. Right now, it drops as you get closer up to 6th Street. And so we're making it continuous so that those 2 travel lanes continue all the way up the hill. In terms of adding another lane at this point in time, the traffic doesn't really warrant it. And by getting rid of that drop where, there's the gap today, we're getting rid of the racing issue, right? Because that's the problem today, is that it does drop and
By
down
drop,
to,
you mean
it,
where
right,
it-
it drops down to 1 lane instead of 2. And so then you get people trying to maneuver, whereas we're providing that consistent 2-lane all the way from the gravel mining area in the northbound direction. So it gets rid of the sort of jockeying that occurs today.
Okay.
And so we think that should take care of a lot of the problems that we're having right now.
While you have this up, Jack and Dan, Dan Lannis is going to connect with you on it, but the council reviewed the United Properties concept at their last meeting, and they'd really like to see a right-in, right-out off of 11 on Jonathan Carver Parkway, just for emergency access and flow of the site to take pressure off of Monroe Drive. So I know the county was okay with the right-in, but there are some issues related to transition for that right-out, but that's something the city is going to ask the county to take a look at. But it's better for me to ask it with them here so they can make you put pressure on you to make that happen.
Lots of pressure. Okay, Glenn?
You done? Okay. Boy, is there thoughts about putting 2 turn lanes onto 212 at the north end?
So we did look at that, and under some of the traffic operation scenario in the future, depending upon the volume, there may need to be in the northbound direction a second right turn lane so that you'd have 2 turns onto 212. We don't think that's in the immediate, 10 to 20 years, but that is something, if the traffic volumes do increase, we did look at some options that would provide that.
Okay, then down to Spring Creek. With the right turn lane from Spring Creek onto
Oops.
JCP,
I don't think I pushed a button. I hope I didn't.
I'm assuming there's going to be, well, that'll have to be a right-of-way acquisition, I'm sure, from that homeowner,
Yes.
okay?
Yep.
I love the idea.
Same thing on Ironwood too. There's probably some right-of-way acquisition on that side as well.
On the northbound, or
On the east side, the entrance onto
on the north side of
corridor.
the,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. That was, I love the tunnel. What else was there? The intersection at White Pine Way. I know there'll probably be some people that'll raise some hackles about not being able to access it coming south. They'll either end up taking Ironwood, or they'll come down and take the,
The roundabout. Yep.
whatever you want to call it,
Yep.
roundabout, the
Yep.
circle, the rotary. And then they'll just get dizzy in the circle and then go up.
I think I know your position on roundabouts.
I am not a huge advocate of roundabouts, but this seems to work. My only concern is that intersection, will there be enough right-of-way to make that work?
We believe there is, yes.
Okay, what is the speed limit going to be on the corridor?
I don't know that the speed limit will change. There will have to be a speed study after the fact. That's how we have to design in conjunction with what the existing design speed of the roadway is. So in this area, I do believe it is 50 miles per hour, sorry. So in terms of White Pine Way, and I will not profess to speak for all residents in that area, one of our focus group meetings was with some of the neighborhood associations, and there was a gentleman who did live in the White Pine neighborhood who was at the meeting, and he was actually a strong advocate for a right-in, right-out there. His wife and daughter had either gotten into an accident or had a near escape from a crash at that location. And his thought was, well, if I can go to a signalized intersection or a different intersection, either north or south of that area, that might be a better option. So, but I do not profess to speak for all residents, because I am sure equally certain that there are people that will not be happy without having a left out.
Sure.
So we're talking about speeds, and would be pure speculation. But when looking at this, if we're going to be adding roundabouts and signals, that would most likely be actually slowing traffic on this road, because you don't have the big runs to get going 50 miles an hour
Right.
for extended
Generally
periods of time. So
Yep. Generally speaking, as things urbanize, speeds do drop. Carver County will be in charge of the traffic signals, and they probably still will give more what we call green time, or the green ball, to the through traffic, so that,
Okay.
you know, the movement the idea is to keep the movement for the heaviest traffic volume, especially during your peak hours, going. So yes, there will be some slowing. Is it going to be a dramatic? People are driving 5 to 20 miles per hour? Probably not.
There will be a considerable amount of traffic moving north through the Oak Tree development that goes up through Carver Crossing area on the west. That's because most people not want to come out, go down, get dizzy in the circle, and then turn back north. Just, that's food for thought.
So Glenn, that's one of the things that we talked about, that we probably are gonna come to the council with some improvements to Ironwood, noting that there will be more traffic on that section of Ironwood from Hartwell going east to 212, or 211, excuse me.
Are we good?
At the intersection of the ball fields and the fire station, public utilities building, is there gonna be lots of signage for fire station ahead or whatever? Because if in case there's an emergency, when they're pulling out, they're gonna have to be crossing 3 lanes of traffic if they're going north.
Yep.
That's a concern at that intersection.
Yep, and there can be some, there's some different tools, and when it goes into the design stage, you can do things when flashing, be aware of emergency vehicles. There are different techniques in addition to just regular signage that do give motorists a heads up as if there is an incident or emergency responders are needing to get out.
Got it. And then the current, at that intersection also, is that going to be just a right in to the public utilities?
So we'd have a full,
Are you going to put a turn lane in there for people going into the public utilities?
so from the southbound, yes, that's
No,
part
from the northbound.
excuse me, from the northbound, yes.
Yes.
Yep.
So when you're coming southbound, there'll be a turn lane to turn into the public utilities building.
That's actually still an open question, yeah.
Okay.
But
Right.
the northbound, we have the left into the.
Yes, I see that. But the one when you're coming southbound, because
That's something we'll have to figure out in the more detailed design phases.
got it. All right.
You good, Glenn?
Still working it.
Well,
And then you said that there were 2 properties that had different lot sizes on the southeast side of 4th Street, correct?
Yes, sir.
Then, is there going to be a barrier on the south of that, or is that just going to be striped?
That's striped, or it's shown as striped right now.
Okay? And then, you said potentially in the future, when I know that isn't part of this, but potentially a roundabout at the bottom of the hill with the creek there?
South of the creek, so it would be at the intersection with County Road where 40 and 11 come together.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
so
out
further to the south.
is that Summer Gate or whatever?
Development.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things there was the county did do an intersection study of that intersection a few years back.
Yep.
And it had different alternatives in it. And then we
Right.
kind of took it from there into this study and then analyzed it. And that's kind of one of our recommendations is do some more minor left turn intersection improvements there and then potentially wait until development occurs or other needs arise where maybe traffic grows to a point where we need to do more at the intersection is our recommendation there. So, but
I was thinking at the intersection at the base of the hill where Old 40 comes in
street.
and the gravel pit comes out. Is there going to be any type of thoughts about that in the future as well?
So right now, we don't have any recommended changes in that area. If traffic volumes get bigger, we would consider widening to 4 lanes. We would look at dedicated turn lanes into and out of the gravel mining area so that so that it was safer to make some of those turns than it is today.
And then moving further south, the next intersection would be the Bluffs.
So again, we would be looking at dedicated turn lanes into those neighborhoods. Again, if traffic volumes get higher, going to the 4 lane all the way down to 40. But in the interim, we would be putting in left and right turn lanes if needed, or a center turn lane through a portion of that.
All right,
Yep.
thank you. That's all I got.
Good. Jack, can you just talk us through beyond the open house next steps?
Yes. So I will go through this quickly. I apologize. We went slow through the other things. That's my fault. So within the next 5 years, what we would be looking at is widening Jonathan Carver Parkway to 2 through lanes in each direction, constructing a traffic signal at Monroe and Spring Creek Drive, constructing a pedestrian underpass, constructing the multi-use trail on the west side of the corridor where there's currently none at the northern end of the corridor, modify the access at White Pine Way, and then construct that roundabout at Dahlgren and 6th Street. The county does have in its plan a mill and overlay of the corridor south of 4th Street. So that's just kind of improving the surface level of that. Installing that turn lane and bypass lane at the County Road Highway 40 intersection, potentially with some tree clearing in that area. There's a safety problem at that intersection. It's not an operation or a mobility issue, that there are some safety concerns, and we think doing the tree clearing and putting in the dedicated turn lanes would be the first step in terms of addressing that problem. The county has gotten some funding through the state and federal governments to do some different types of striping along the corridor, so that would definitely be done as part of that mill and overlay project. There are plans to expand Trunk Highway 212 west of the city of Carver to Cologne to 4 lanes, so that would be occurring kind of in that next 5-year time frame, along with making some improvements at County Road 43. And then as development continues, trying to develop the city east-west collector routes just south of Highway 212 and north of Highway 212 as development occurs.
1 second, what's an R-cut intersection?
So that is an intersection, and I apologize, I don't have a picture here with me. It changes, instead of having a full four-legged intersection where you can make all the movements at that one spot, your left turns are separated out.
It's like in Cologne.
Oh,
Yeah, yes,
got it.
thank you. Reference point.
Is in the circle.
Yeah. In the next 6 to 15 years, again, continuing to develop those east-west collector routes, studying that need for that new interchange as I had talked about. Consider constructing a local overpass of Highway 212 between Jonathan Carver Parkway and County Highway 43. That would serve local traffic. You wouldn't be able to access Highway 212, but you could get to the north and south sides of the city. And then look at a need for the roundabout at Jonathan Carver Parkway and County Highway 40 if safety reasons or if there's continued safety problems occur. In terms of operations, we think that the roundabout is needed in about 20 years from now in terms of traffic flow. 20 plus years of growth, potentially, depending upon what that study says, construct a new interchange at Highway 212 and Jonathan Carver Parkway, make additional improvements at that Levi Griffin Road and County Highway 61 intersection. At that point, there would need to be some better lane configuration on Highway 61 at that location. Potentially, again, 20 plus years, widen Jonathan Carver to 4-lane facility south of 4th Street. Then construct any remaining trail segments that are left to the south, and then potentially construct an interchange at Highway 212 and County Highway 43. So our open house in terms of near-term activities is on April 11th. We'll take feedback as we heard from tonight. We'll hear from the residents as well and modify, change things as we need. We'll prepare a draft and final report. We'd like to have that back to folks later this spring. Hopefully May-ish is sort of the time frame. We've got a draft that we're getting ready for the city and the county right now. Then transition to potential design activities for that northern portion of the corridor and plan for some of the projected costs. At this point, at a corridor level, without going into great details in terms of design, we have to do a lot of surveying and a lot of additional information. As a placeholder for construction, right-of-way acquisition, doing all of the design work pieces, we're estimating somewhere between $15 and $17 million for that.
Is that county, state, local?
That's the total cost. So we'd have to, the different cost sharing, that's something we kind of have to move forward with you further on and get that down on paper so we can respectively plan in our CIP budgets. Right now, the year for construction, Brent isn't here, but we've identified potentially the year 2021. We'd like to potentially move into design, pending everybody's acceptance of things and direction, especially from yourselves, into design potentially later this fall. Certainly in the first part of 2020, we need to get going on that if we want it there. One of the considerations is the 212 project. If we do get full funding, which is still up in the air, that potentially could start in the year 2022 and be a 2-year project. We'd like to fit in Jonathan Carver before that. There's also the Chaska has the 41 downtown project. We don't want both river crossings affected too poorly. They're looking at a 2020 for their project in Chaska. But that's the bigger really project is the 212 project that we're hoping to move around. So we're kind of in this period where either before 212 or after 212, we'd like to get it in sooner. It's certainly very feasible to do the 2021 thing, but we also don't want to speak for yourselves in our budget thing. The county has also advanced money for cities for financing things. It's just a matter of working out the details and moving down that path with you together as a team.
So what's the traditional cost share between the city and the county?
I can't answer that exactly. I don't have as much experience that Lynn and Darren have on that one. I don't know if anybody, Brent, you have any idea what you might expect out of the total project cost or something like
Yeah,
that?
the last number that the city received from the county was in the $2.5 to $3 million range. That doesn't include any improvements that you'd want to make to Dahlgren or Ironwood going west. It also doesn't include any utilities work. So there's, I think we mentioned during our strategic planning session, there's a major sanitary sewer line that most likely needs to be upgraded, or it would be the appropriate time to upgrade that when the road is dug up. And then typically 100% of the landscaping costs, so the city mentioned, or the council mentioned wanting to have that as kind of a gateway corridor or streetscaped, and that's going to be a city cost as well. So as a part of your long-term financial plan, we'll be building some of those elements within it, but we could be upwards of probably $4 million by the time we're all said and done.
I don't know if you heard Dan's number, but he said it was between 15 and 17 just off the top of his head.
It'll be that would be the city share.
The total out of
Okay.
there.
I did hear Dan say the county would pay for.
A lot. A lot more than any other project, I heard him say.
We got that on record, right?
So, I don't know if I said that or not.
We all heard you.
You did.
We'll gladly pay you Tuesday.
My boss is committed to the right in, and that right out is really very expensive out there.
All right.
Thank you.
So we will be seeing you guys again.
Yes. Yep.
Great.
April 11th?
April 11th, and then here.
Yep.
For the final.
Yep.
But April 11th at the school, 6:30 to 8:30?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time tonight. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your work.
All right. Moving on, flood protection protocol. Mr. Skoke.
Thank you. Basically, just wanted to take an opportunity here to kind of update everybody what's going on. Obviously, the flooding's been in the news and on everybody's mind. So really just kind of letting everybody know kind of what we're doing and what we're doing to prepare for it at this point in time. So right now, Public Services staff is working, getting all of our lift stations, our stormwater lift stations. So if you remember, we talked about those here last summer. The stormwater lift stations are used once we start closing the gate as the river rises. The stormwater, the snow will continue to melt. As it hits kind of where we close the gate on the levee, this pumps that water up and over the levee back into the river. So we have 3 of those still working at this point in time with the stormwater, 2018 stormwater project. We will be down to 2 of them next year, but right now we still have 3. So as getting ready for kind of the high waters is right now we shoveled them all out, got them all up and running, make sure all the force mains are clean and operating. So we've got those all started and tested. And then we have a lot of portable pumps with some of the original projections of what we're looking at for floodwaters. All of our portable pumps are in the shop, getting them up and running, making sure they're ready to roll. All the hoses are good to go, so we're kind of preparing for that. Staff is also, we kind of went through and got all of our sandbags. We've got probably 1,000 sandbags on hand ourselves that we have, plus we have an inventory with the county, stored with the county. So we kind of rechecked with everybody, made sure all that stuff's there. You'll probably see some sandbagging. We'll start building some, or making some sandbags here early, at the end of this week. We did start a discussion with other groups. The fire department met with them on kind of what we're looking at and what we'd need for help as we kind of go along this path is some of the flooding. Carver County did hold a meeting last Friday. Kind of, they started the EOC, the Emergency Operations Center, so that's in full effect right now. So anything that we do with flood-related stuff kind of runs through them, and that's kind of gearing up and planning in the event, there's some FEMA reimbursements and stuff that happen if those areas, but they want to track road closures, people need sandbags, and how some of those are going. So we kind of walk through some of that stuff. And then some of the other things we're preparing for is we got to start closing some of our roads. We start working with our local vendors if we have to do anything with our levees, if we have to raise them, if we have to close streets. So we're working with them, again, working with the county on additional sandbags, and then plastic. And plastic's a big one, getting heavy mill plastic to cover our temporary levees and stuff. So we're working on all those pieces and parts, so. The other thing that we do during all this is we really watch the National Weather Service. So This here was taken this morning, and the National Weather Service, as you can kind of see, as of Wednesday, we were down around the Jordan gauge of 9, and right now we're at 21.4, and actually, just before we got here, I checked it again, and we're at about 22.4 now, so raised another foot from 7 o'clock to 4, so twice a day it's updated. As you can see on here, we're looking at it cresting Sunday at 27. The new projections are 29 on Sunday as well. So if you can see up on the screen as well, in June of last year, we had that rain event where we ended up having to do some temporary stuff on Main Street Bridge. We reached 30 feet at that time, and it didn't reach our temporary levees we put in place. So just kind of give you a gauge of how that looked last year. Top of our levees are all pretty much at an average of 37 feet across there to kind of put that in perspective. And then on there, like Riverside Park now with that, that's closed now. Riverside Park is, the water's already up into the parking lot and will be into the road yet this evening. So we did close that. The gate on Main Street, which is down by the trestle, that's closed. We closed that this morning. So that lift station is pumping all the stormwater. And then Ash Street will be our next one. And that one will be potentially later tomorrow, and then again, we'll close Broadway as our last one, so. So one of the other things we've been working on over some time is kind of, we talk about the Jordan gauge, and I did give you a larger handout because this is a little difficult to see, but we've been working with staff over the last few years and Bolton and Mink trying to survey some data. One of the things that we ran into is really coming up with kind of an action plan when it comes to our river. And we always hear the Jordan gauge is at 9 feet or 10 feet, or what does that really mean? So we actually worked with Bolton and Mink, and we were able to come up with kind of an elevation component to this. So as you look at a set of plans, you can kind of see that elevation, and it actually means something. And then we also correlated that as what is some of the infrastructure maybe that's affected by those numbers that you see, and then also maybe some of the staff action plans that you're seeing there. So this is kind of this is a working document, and we are continuing to update it and add pieces and parts to this to help everybody understand what's going on, but it also gives the ability that anybody can grab that, knowing what's going on, and shut the gates in the appropriate time and make sure things are in place. So as you can kind of see is at 21, the Jordan gauge, it's in the yellow. It's 706 in elevation, and water's approaching the parking lot in Riverside Park, and that's the point in time we close the park. So kind of all those things kind of correlate with what we're seeing on the gauge and stuff. So it's taken some time because some of the formulas that Bolton Mink had to put into this, just because based on the flooding elevations, the amount it raises here changes. So every so often they had to make some adjustments to that. So it actually correlated to what we're seeing here, being we lost our gauge a number of years ago. With that, I'm willing to answer any questions if you have any.
What year was it that we added to the levy? Was that 2013?
2011.
2011. And what was the level at that point?
So 2010, it was 33, Jordan gauge of 33. So
Yeah, the 2011, one of the impetuses for that was Governor Dayton came out to the scale facility in Jordan, is that where that is? And the National Weather Service kind of inferred that there was a decent chance that we were going to exceed the 1965 flood levels, and so that was the impetus to say let's raise the top of the levee by 3 feet.
2011 is on here, I'm sorry. It's 31.8 that hit in 2011.
Brian, what was the 65 at?
65 was 35. That was on that last slide.
Can I ask questions?
Go ahead.
Brian, in the last few times that we've had to do this, so we've asked for a lot of volunteer help for this, including levee watch and filling sandbags. Are you planning on asking for that help from the community again?
One of the things we worked with the fire department is with the levee watch, there's a lot of criteria on how we watch it and kind of getting some feedback from other people. We have to make sure we train them, and what our goal is right now is to have the fire department help us manage the levee watch, and then we'll fill in from city staff perspective as the rest of them. If it prolongs a long period of time and we get tired, those are something we're going to have to look at doing, but initially we're going to hope to kind of watch it internally just to make sure we're watching all the right parts. Because we're really supposed to be walking the toes of the levee, which is in and out of people's backyards and stuff, and just having anybody in those areas with the wet conditions, we just want to make sure we're putting the right people in the right situation so nobody get injured.
Sure, how about filling the sandbags?
Sandbags will definitely be a need, depending on the quantity we're gonna need. A lot of times, and everything we've done in the past has been kind of in bulk, where we wrap the big levees with plastic, and then the sandbags, all we need is really for over the top of that. So in the event that we do need help with that, we'll reach out to people.
Okay. If you need help, I mean, just in the past, it has been kind of amazing to watch the city come together, and people are definitely willing to volunteer to help out with those sandbags. So don't feel that you have to do it all yourself. People would be happy to help.
No, it's a good point.
And my other question then is, for the new lift station work that we did down here, when they built that levee back up, because they had to dig into that, how is that the integrity of the levee in that spot? Or do we know what that is? Was it packed down correctly? Do we have a weak spot there? I know I've heard some questions from some of the residents in downtown who have had questions about that specific spot.
Yeah, in those areas, we did put like material back in there that was there, and it was compacted, and we did have a Bolton and Mink staff member there on site watching when that went back in and compacted. So it's we assume that everything's back in place and where it's at, and we haven't heard otherwise.
Okay.
So we're confident that we're in good shape with that.
And then wasn't there a piece of the bridge that was still sitting on top of the levee? What are the plans for that, I guess?
Yeah, we got some other piping and some removal there, so that's the approach to the trestle. So that'll go back in place once we're done in that area. So all they did this last fall was really sink the structure in place. So we still got some piping and some digging we have to do there once.
Well, the reason I'm asking is if the projections keep getting higher as the spring rains come, and that's still sitting there, will that be going in before? Because if we have to build up levees, isn't that sitting basically on the trail? Or is it off to the side?
It's off to the side, so if we have to move it, we'd get together with the contractor, we'd get it moved, and if we have to build around it, or we move it so we can build our
Okay. So you can move it out of the way if you
Yep.
need to. Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
No questions. I appreciate your and your staff's efforts on staying in front of this and keeping everyone informed. Thank you.
Yeah, so I echo Christy's comments about volunteers. People have come up to me and asked, how can they help? So trying to find, I know you guys are so busy as it is, but keeping in mind a role for those volunteers and the people who want to help and not being afraid to ask. And the only other thing that I wanted to mention is this is a tremendous amount of work, and your folks have gone right from snow plowing last weekend into, and the flood preparation stuff was going on
Right.
a month ago.
Yeah.
But you guys have done a tremendous job, and all of the public services folks have done a really great job, and I know that this is a tremendous task, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right. All right. Thanks, Brent. Moving on to the Boulevard Maintenance Ordinance Draft. Mr. Merrick.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So during your February work session, we discussed the elements that make up a right-of-way, and specifically boulevard maintenance, which we commonly refer to the boulevard as kind of the unpaved area within the right-of-way. Based on that conversation, a draft ordinance has been created which formally requires an abutting property owner to maintain the boulevard area immediately adjacent to their property. Practically, there hasn't been an issue with it. The city does have ordinance language related to shoveling a sidewalk in the right-of-way that's adjacent to your property. However, we don't have mowing of grass, which would be consistent with snow removal, and so we've put together a draft ordinance with the help of the city attorney. One of the pieces that I wanted to mention is that the draft exempts maintenance requirements for county roads, state and federal roads. We talked about that briefly during our work session. One of the things that we were concerned about were the unintended consequences of establishing maintenance requirements in right-of-ways of other jurisdictions. They may or may not want residents to be within their right-of-way. They may have different standards, and so we didn't want to have to try to monitor those or be in conflict with their existing standards, so that there's an exemption there. There's also an exemption that provides the Public Services Director with the ability to exempt an area if it's a wetland area or a significant steep slope. That way we certainly don't want someone who to put their safety in jeopardy by attempting to maintain a boulevard area. It's essentially just, I would classify this as a language cleanup more than anything. We don't have a problem. I'm not expecting there to be a problem, but we did have a gap in our ordinance. So happy to answer any questions, and the city attorney is here as well, should you have any questions for Larry. And again, this is just for your review. We'd have to take this to the regular meeting and follow our publication protocol for ordinance.
When I'm looking at this and it's saying that the city would then go down and do the maintenance after they were noticed and did not comply, do you have a ballpark figure of what that might cost? Because I'm just looking at the administrative charge of $8 and then I guess the inspection charge after the fact of $100. And if we're already sending a crew down there to cut it, I don't understand why we're charging them to inspect it after the fact. If you look on ABC after assessment. So I guess that's just my curious question. If we hire or have a city staff person go down there and mow that, then to say, well, we're going to come,
It depends.
the
So
inspection, is
it's a
that
good,
after the fact?
good question. It depends on the workload. So sometimes we'll have our current staff do it. Sometimes we'll contract it out. That $100 number doesn't need to, that can move up and down. There is an issue in cities throughout the state where some folks find it frankly more affordable to have the city do it. And so there is an element of, we don't want this to be a practice where you just don't cut your lawn and then every 6 to 8 weeks the city does it for cheaper than maybe what you could have it done. And so there's a little bit of kind of grit in there to make someone not want to go through this process. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Thank you for your,
Thanks for clarifying,
yeah, thanks.
That legal opinion.
But when we call it an inspection charge, to me, that is maybe misleading. Is there another thing that we can, because if I'm reading this correctly, and if I'm not, let me know, that we go out and, is the inspection charge coming before or after we do the work?
It's due when we mail the invoice. It's basically a means to defray the administrative expenses the city incurs. They may be staff expenses. Candidly, you may be sending your city engineer out to do this because it may just be easier to have them go do it when they're out reviewing other things. But it doesn't get the city rich and famous, but it does make sure that the city costs get covered, and it does make sure that there's some sting for the property owner so they actually do it, which is what this is all about.
Okay, so maybe I'm not saying it correctly. So the inspection charge of $100 comes, so it's been mowed by the city. We send someone back out to make sure it's been mowed, or this is before that? I know we're kind of getting around
The way I understand it, it's the inspection charge of it. It's in violation, so it's before.
Okay.
We're not going out afterwards.
Okay, that was a really long way to get there. I apologize, I wasn't more clear. Yeah. That's all I have for right now.
Larry, is this ordinance common in other jurisdictions?
Yes.
Thank
Brent?
you.
The administrative charges and the inspection charges, those are the same if I wouldn't shovel my sidewalk? It's the same fee schedule?
That I don't know.
Oh, I got a good one. Okay. Just wondering if it's
Do
consistent
you
with.
want them to be?
No.
I guess in my mind, it makes sense to have them consistent.
I guess I couldn't, without seeing exactly what the other ordinance says right now, I don't.
To my knowledge,
Not that
we don't have an inspection fee as it relates to snow removal.
Okay,
That I know for sure.
okay. Any other questions?
I have one. So we had the grass, I believe it said 8 inches. That was kind of the cutoff line for, then we have to go out and do something about it. And I believe the intent of the rest of it is that any additional improvements, would that mean if you were to plant perennials or something like that, that it's at your own discretion, they could be removed? So those are still allowed?
We're kind of we're a little bit silent on that, but correct. They can go in there, but if the city has to go in and
Sure.
that's kind of, they're responsible for taking, unless there provides, or there's, someone plants a evergreen tree right on the corner and it interrupts sight
Right.
triangles at that intersection.
Okay.
The one thing that we got some feedback on, there's, this doesn't address anything related to the city's like maintenance protocol. So there's been some questions related to where the city cuts in boulevards and where they don't. This doesn't address that. That's a kind of a separate issue. But if the council has questions or residents as we get to the council meeting, we can address those pieces. But this isn't a operations and maintenance policy for public services as it relates to maintaining grounds or areas within the city.
I really like it.
I do too. Anyone else?
I agree. I think
Questions?
it brings consistency.
So, could a homeowner take the grass out and fill it in with rock? Boulevard area? Just a question.
They
wouldn't have to mow it.
They could. They do in some places. I would say I defer to Brian as far as whether that's a good idea or not. We have run into occasions where folks will do that along like their driveway as like edging. If they put it all up in front, present company excluded. Sometimes that rock can get out into the roadway and cause some safety issues if it's not of a large enough diameter. Is that fair to say, Brian?
Yeah, the only other thing would be at their own, discretion too, because I mean, as you're plowing, if we jump the curb or something and it ends up as a pile, would be their responsibility to kind of put it all back together.
But they could put rock in and so they don't have to pull out the mower.
Unless you live on 6th Street, that it's violated.
That's all I got.
All right. I think we are good. All right. Thank you, Brent. Moving on to the city manager's report.
Yeah, I do have a number of updates. I put something on the screen. The city is just at the precipice of investigating the vacation of an alley section, so you can see that on the screen. It essentially runs from Broadway to Mount Hope Road in between 4th Street and 5th Street East. A number of years ago, the city took on a large initiative to vacate several alleys and old road right-of-ways within the city that were unimproved. So this is an unimproved alleyway. It's grass. And so when you're maintaining a right-of-way, we ended up taking on liability where people might build something within that right-of-way. We really don't want to put good people in a position where they're building things that are outside of maybe their property lines, et cetera. And so we spoke to the city engineer's office this morning, and they're going to be sending out.
Brent, clarification. Yeah, that's between the schoolhouse and the church on Broadway there. Okay, that's the apartments, there's City Hall. Got it. All right.
Yeah, I had to take another look too, because I
Sure.
was like, wait a minute
So
here.
the process includes a public hearing. So property owners within, is it 350 feet? No? Just directly adjacent to property owners will receive the public hearing notice. And we're going to do door hangers on those folks when the survey team goes out there. So, because we have to prepare a legal description. But essentially how a street vacation or alley vacation works is it's divided down the middle, and property owners, will just call it the north and south side, even though it's not due north and due south, they'd get the property. That's how the process works. There's quite a few more details within it, but in a general way, that's how that works. So I'm not asking the council to provide support or opposition to it, just letting you know that we're kind of teeing that up for the council to review probably in early May. Does that sound right? Any specific questions or pressing questions?
I appreciate you moving on that. I know this stems from a resident concern, so thanks for being so reactive.
Then a couple other items. We just posted out today that cleanup day is Saturday, May 18th. So that's a one-day event. So there'll be notices going out in the April and May newsletters. We've scheduled a kind of a joint council and commission training for Monday, April 8th. We'd have Richard Fersman come back, talk about two effective teams and how they work together. Then we're going to do a little bit on open meeting law as well as do you have something, Glenn?
Yes. So it's for sure on the 8th now?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Point taken.
Wow, that was a little harsh.
And then a preview of the strategic plan. I did get a call from Sheriff Camerood on Friday. Apparently Laketown Township has decided not to continue their patrol efforts in 2019. So as you may recall, we do a .65 of a position. They do .35 for evening shifts, so either Tuesday through Friday or Wednesday through Saturday. Sheriff Camerood asked if the city would be interested in picking up the balance of that through 2019. So we could really start at any time. So if we started in July, it'd be about $20,000 to the city.
Question, would we, would that be full-time then? We'd have an extra full-time night?
We'd have a full-time night. It wouldn't be 24/7 coverage, but it would be a full-time position. They'd be in Carver the whole time.
7 days a week?
Pardon?
7 days a week, or is that
Well, it'd still be the Tuesday through Friday or Wednesday through Saturday.
Got it.
If you wanted to pursue it, we could prepare a formal memo and have that considered at one of your next meetings. It would have to come out of the special capital project fund. We don't have $20,000 in another area, or you could choose to cut something from the 2019 budget. One of the things to consider for the 2020 budget as it relates to that is the city will likely either have to fund that whole position in 2020 or try to find another agency or jurisdiction within Carver County to fund that .35. The county won't just let us pay for .65. They'll fund it through the end of 2019. But depending upon where somebody else is at in the county and the geography of that, there's probably a discussion that the council is going to need to have as it relates to the 2020 budget. But I did tell Sheriff Camerood that I'd address that with the council as far as seeking whether or not you're interested in having a conversation about funding that for the balance of 2019.
I'm currently not interested. I think that our coverage at night is great. We're not adding days by that. We contracted out for the .65 for this year. Obviously, we'll have to take another look at it in 2020 as to how that either will split out with another community or we'll have to look at having a full-time night officer. But we just plucked out money that we didn't budget for the transit, and now we'd be plucking out another. And for me, as long as we're not losing any services, because they have to honor their contract with us this year, is that correct?
Correct.
That I'm currently not interested in spending more money on additional service hours on the same days that we're already having them until looking at it for the 2020 budget.
I agree with that. It's a topic for discussion for the 2020 budget. But as of right now, we don't need to spend that. We can look at it,
So-
absolutely.
Yeah, so where I come from, I'm saying the same thing as you guys, just a different way, I think. I agree that we're not looking to spend money that we don't have. Public safety is of the utmost importance, but I feel like we need a broader case to make an evidence-based decision on why we need this, not just that there's another point, whatever, available. So if there's a need, it's certainly one of my highest priorities, but
Let's look at
we
it.
need to have evidence-based. So
absolutely.
until, Brent, I think we know that
We're on time.
we need an issue. Yes, okay. Do you have any?
Same thoughts.
So I just have one last item. I do have a handful more, but I can hit those in the regular meeting just for the sake of time. I did want to mention that to your left, to my right, we have a council chair and then the chair that we're looking at for the village hall room in the new city hall. So if you want to take a look at those, we're planning on bringing you a draft furniture plan at your, probably either your April 1st or April 15th work session. Just so we don't get too far on a couple of those details, we wanted to have those viewed by you and get some feedback on that. And I'll have the balance of those during the balance of my updates during the regular meeting.
I'll
Sounds
make a
good.
motion to adjourn.
There's a motion by Councilmember Henry,
A second?
and a second from Councilmember Mock. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, and with that, let's start the next meeting. All right.